For many in this country, it is no laughing matter. An appeals court backing a government-backed ban on French satirist Dieudonné's one-man show. This on what was to be opening night of a national tour. That overrules a lower court ruling earlier in the day in the western city of Nantes. Critics called Dieudonné's show blatantly anti-Semitic. The controversy went global when Dieudonné's friend, footballer Nicolas Anelka, recently celebrated an English Premiership goal with Dieudonné's trademark quenelle, which is described as half-Nazi salute, half-up-yours gesture. Anelka apologetic, saying he thought the gesture was merely anti-establishment. Dieudonné, several times over, has been convicted of hate speech and faces new charges after expressing his seeming regret that the gas chambers no longer existed when asked about the anchor of France Inter State Radio's breakfast show, who happens to be Jewish. That's when the country's ambitious interior minister swung into action, Manuel Valls, publishing guidelines that allow local mayors to ban Dieudonné's sold-out shows. Respect for freedom of expression does not prevent, in exceptional circumstances, the banning of an activity if the measure is aimed only at preventing a breach of public order. Where there's disruption of public order, where is there disruption of public order, argue Dieudonné's lawyers. How can a judge decide what's funny and what isn't? As for the far right's leader, whose poll numbers are soaring, Marine Le Pen denounces the act, but is against banning the show. Two questions. What are the limits of free speech? And are politicians rewarding the attention-seeking behavior of what the French might call a provocateur by weighing in on the matter? Today in the France 24 debate, free speech or hate speech? And with us to talk about it, he's a French socialist, member of parliament, Philippe Cordery. Welcome back to the France 24 debate. Welcome back as well to Philippe Moreau-Chevrolet, columnist at Le Plus, the interactive website of the Nouvel Observateur weekly magazine. Also with us, the University of Paris professor Justin Smith. Welcome to the show. Thanks. And welcome as well to Diana Johnstone, contributor to left-wing U.S. magazine Counterpunch. Thank you for being with us. France 24 debate, where you can join the show on Facebook and on Twitter. The hashtag F24debate. Before we go to our panel, let's go to Nantes. That appeals court reversing a lower court ruling, banning the show just before it was supposed to kick off, standing by outside the auditorium. France 24's Yves Irvine. Yves, what's the reaction where you are?
Well, a great deal of shock here outside the Zénith in Nantes, where almost 6,000 Dieudonné fans, pretty much a sellout show, had gathered for this show, Le Mur, or The Wall. When the announcement was made overturning that earlier decision in Nantes to let it go ahead, there was first very loud booing. Fans then sang the Marseillaise, the French national anthem, twice before calling out this demand for the right to freedom of speech. And that's what they see here really as what has been put into question in France tonight. They also called for the French Interior Minister, Manuel Valls, to resign. Pretty much outraged, but remaining very calm. There is quite a strong but very discreet police presence on both sides of the Zénith here. But for the minute, very few fans have gone home. They're gathered here behind, outside the Zénith Stadium, waiting for Dieudonné to make an appearance. They believe he is inside, so he will come out and, if not put on a show, at least address his fans.
All right, we'll continue to monitor that with you. Yves Irvine, many thanks. Lots of political reactions coming in. That interior minister we were mentioning saying the Republic has won. The Prime Minister has also hailed the decision. Remember, an appeals court reversing the opinion of a judge who had ruled the essential aim of Dieudonné's act, quote, cannot be considered being an attempt to violate human dignity. More from Aurore Dupuis.
Fined several times for defamation, hate speech and racial discrimination against Jews. Yet French comedian Dieudonné has never paid any of these fines, and despite authorities' numerous attempts to ban his shows, he's always won his appeals in the name of freedom of speech.
It's not only about freedom of speech, it's also about protecting the public's freedom to laugh. French people should be able to laugh at the jokes they like. It's not up to the Interior Minister to tell us what's funny and what's not.
Manuel Valls sent a circular to mayors across France advising them to cancel Dieudonné's upcoming performances, seen as a potential threat to public order. The scandal even forced French President François Hollande to step in.
Nobody should use a show as a way to provoke and promote blatant anti-Semitic views.
4 different French cities decided to pull the plug, but the comedian remains defiant and has vowed to ignore the rules. He insists he's merely anti-establishment and anti-Zionist. He slammed critics, saying that his trademark canal gesture was not an inverted Nazi salute. But Dieudonné, of a French mother and a Cameroonian father, does have controversial friends, including far-right political figures and Holocaust deniers. Some have appeared on stage with Dieudonné on several occasions.
I guess let's start with you, Philippe Cordery. Your reaction to that verdict?
Quite satisfied, in fact, and sort of happy that the government has been extremely tough with this issue, because you cannot just minimize racism and anti-Semitism. Pierre Desproges, a famous French comedian, who's a real comedian, this one, said you can laugh of anything but not with everyone. And I think with Dieudonné you cannot laugh. He's more than just a comedian. He's a political actor today. And we cannot just let him have... We know what his show is like. We know what's inside the show, because he's had several in Paris. And at the time when the show was starting in different cities in France, I think the government was right to say, no, we cannot let that happen. There's a limit to what you can say. There's a limit to freedom of speech when it becomes racist and anti-Semitic.
The issue of it being a threat to public order, that show's been running for months and months. Do you think that that legal basis is sound?
Yes, because, I mean, anti-Semitic speech is a threat to public order. And the fact that the movement is getting extremely political and getting out of the theatre itself was, I think, an additional reason to be extremely tough.
Philippe Moreau-Chevrolet?
I think this whole operation is a PR stunt for the Minister of the Interior, Manuel Valls. That's a way for him to promote his image just before the next coming elections and to reunite the electorate on the left, the people, the voters on the left, and to convince them to go voting. The one thing to know is that for the next elections, the provisions are that the voters on the left won't go voting. They won't go to the polls. So they are trying to unite these voters and to tell them there is a sense to your commitment to vote. This sense is we are fighting for our republic, for a common good, and this common good is against this evil that Dieudonné is standing for. And that's true that Dieudonné is evil. Nobody doubts that what he does is despicable, and there is no debate about it. But the way the government chose to do it is really, really not responsible at all. I mean, this is disastrous. We are making of Dieudonné a national icon. We are putting him on the map, national map. Nobody knew about him before that. Not very much. His fans, few people, real anti-Semitic people, knew him, but he was not a national icon. No, now in France, everybody knows Dieudonné. It's like he's against the system. He's standing against the establishment by himself.
And are you suggesting that he's a monster created by the current government?
We created a monster because we needed one. And the consequences are this monster is actually out in the field.
Let's be less cynical.
That's true. That's not cynical. I'm not the cynical one. Valls is a cynical one.
Justin Smith.
I have to say, Manuel Valls strikes me as a sort of law and order sheriff who's kicking up a dust storm
He's a TV
for his own. Exactly. And this isn't only in the Dieudonné case; it's in other cases. It's the Varg Vikernes case. It's the expulsion of the Roma.
But hang on a second here. There is a cultural quid pro quo here. If you're coming from the United States, where the First Amendment. Here in France, there is the notion, and everyone accepts it, that hate speech is punishable by law.
Sure, and I do try to put my commitment to the First Amendment on hold and look at this in a different cultural and legal context. But at the same time, one has to ask, even in this context, what is the utility of creating such a spectacle, and how exactly can we, or can you, the French, turn it over to the state to determine when speech is a breach of public order? And in my opinion, Dieudonné's speech alone falls well below the threshold of violation of public order.
Diana Johnstone?
Well, I have quite a few things to say, but to start with, I would say that it's very clear when something should be banned or arrested and not. That is to say, if Dieudonné were going to Nantes to stand up and say to his public, please take big sticks and go out and smash the shop windows of Jewish shops, then he would be violating the law. That would be a clear violation. But if he makes jokes, it's verbal. It's a form of expression. And the fact that some people are offended by that, people are offended by all sorts of things, especially stand-up comedians. They specialize in offending people. And I see absolutely no reason whatsoever, so long as you are not calling for acts against people, to call that, to say you are creating hate is a subjective notion. Who knows what's creating hate? Maybe I could say, oh, I just love that person, and that would make people hate him. You just don't know what creates hate. This is a subjective judgment. But it is very clear if you say, we are going to go and beat up Jews, well, that would be a call for violence. That would be a violation. But simply to make jokes about things that happened in the past, it may be offensive, but it should come under freedom of speech.
Philippe Cordery.
Yeah, but to accept jokes and humor about racism and anti-Semitism is, in a way, accepting racism and anti-Semitism. And it's this, I mean, it's this trivialization of racism and anti-Semitism that creates violence behind that.
No violence
so I think
created.
you have to be, there's
no
things that we
violence
cannot
created.
accept in our society.
The violence being created is being created
right
now.
We cannot accept a certain amount of things in our society. Our republic is based on values.
Law.
And
Law. It's
yeah,
based
law,
on law.
And our law says that you cannot do hate speech.
Well, you should have laws maybe that make sense.
And these people will create the violence behind. And Dieudonné, at least now people know who Dieudonné is.
Who cares about Dieudonné, really?
But at least people know who he is, because people who were coming to his shows, people have been trapped. We saw the tennisman, the sort of basketball player, Tony Parker, had absolutely nothing to do with Dieudonné or other, who had to do this, who did this sort of Canel salute, because
who said like
and he regretted
it. That he thought it was an anti-establishment,
and it was not, it's not only an anti-system; it's a quasi-Nazi salute, and people got
at the
trapped.
beginning, yes, but now that's not the case
and
anymore.
People got trapped, and it's important for the society.
I'm not saying it's a good thing
to know who he is, and at least now people cannot say that they didn't know
who
Dieudonné is.
So we all agree that it's not a good thing, but I suppose the question is, where do you think these hateful sentiments are going to go if the state succeeds in banning all public expression of them? Do you think they're going to disappear? Do you think everyone's going to have love in their hearts? Or do you think perhaps there's a more effective way of marginalizing this sort of hateful sentiment, which would be by addressing, I think, the disaffection of which someone like Dieudonné is a symptom.
We're not saying that you don't have we're not saying that you don't have your reasons to do it, but that's not the good strategy. That's not the best strategy. That's obviously a strategy that is adopted because there is the timing. I mean, the elections are coming. Manuel Valls is in need of medias. I don't know what he's looking at.
To be honest, I think that's a little bit cynical.
That's the only
what you're
reason.
I mean, there's also the fact that Dieudonné's tour starts now, and if we don't ban it now...
Who cares about Dieudonné, except for Manuel Valls? Who cared about Dieudonné before this old story blew? I mean, that's it. That's
a lot of people.
There is no sense about it.
And behind Dieudonné,
we are worried about
question.
Unemployment, the economic crisis. These are real subjects, and the people want to hear about it. it.
Dieudonné is a symptom of that.
Dieudonné is a symptom of it.
Absolutely, and I'm not saying...
It's like fighting a disease by I don't know,
to
trying to suppress the symptoms.
You have to do both. You have to fight against the causes and the roots.
Yeah, but the emphasis is on the symptoms,
against,
not on the disease.
Diana Johnstone.
But we know why it's done. Why it's done. Obviously.
Diana Johnstone.
Well, everybody is saying that this is gesture, which I find impolite. I wouldn't make that gesture myself. But everybody is saying that this gesture, some people say it's a Nazi salute. Now, the question is, are the people who making it say it's a Nazi salute? They say it isn't. I mean, it's LICRA and other organizations have said, this is a Nazi salute in reverse, or something like that. But the people who are making it say it isn't. Now, you ought to listen to the people who are making it to know what it means. And one of the things that I think is extremely important...
But some people have had pictures of themselves taken in front of...
I know. So
in front of
let me finish.
Synagogues.
Let me finish.
And will you say that someone who makes a real Nazi salute
what I'm
says that it
saying,
isn't
please?
Will you accept that?
I haven't finished what I'm saying. I'm saying that this is a symptom of a generation which is totally depoliticized. The whole problem is that since the referendum of 2005, when the French people voted against the Constitution of Europe, and the politicians turned right around and voted the same sort of thing, there is a disillusion with politics, and there's a depoliticization. And so what do people turn? An ambiguous symbol. It can mean anything. Yes, exactly. It can mean absolutely anything, but it's a symptom, and you should listen to the people who are making it because they are a generation that can't express itself.
Let me ask Justin Smith on this. Are your students depoliticized, as Diana Johnstone was?
There is a certain sense of historical discontinuity, I think, and there's very little memory of, I think, the long post-war period in which the Holocaust was something with which we had a living continuity. And also there's no memory among the youth of 19, 20 years old of a period in which Israel was not a serious issue for international relations. And I think these two together, these two changes since, say, the 1980s or the 1990s, have profoundly affected young people's perception of the sort of issues that Dieudonné is exploiting. But I just wanted to get back to your point. I think this is not quite, I wouldn't be quite so generous in my interpretation of a gesture such as the Quenelle, with quite a bit of experience in Germany, where the far right has become very expert in euphemizing expression of far right sentiments. When something looks like a reference to Hitler, for example, it probably is, no matter how much the person making the gesture is denying it.
Well, I tend to agree that, I mean, a lot of young people are depoliticized, but Dieudonné is repoliticizing them. And people depoliticized coming to his show are getting a political message. And so it's important for those who are against Dieudonné's thesis also to treat him for what he is, which is a political actor today, and therefore to answer politically. He's not a comedian.
But that's not what you're doing. You're
political.
banning him. You're not answering him politically.
We are repoliticizing the debate around him.
I mean, debate with him in public if you disagree with him.
Right,
that's fine.
And when we come back, we'll hear what the Interior Minister said specifically on this. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.